Well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. And we're very happy to have this evening Haley Halpern. She is a Montessori trainer with Montessori Institute, and you're based in Melbourne, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Haley, let's start with my favorite question because I really enjoy hearing about how people come across Montessori originally. What's your Montessori story?
Can I go back a bit before my
Yes.
Montessori? I was I had a great school experience. I was really lucky. I was in a community primary school, and then I went to an all-girls secondary school, but it was just a great environment that suited me perfectly. I was really successful academically and, ended up being school captain. So I just had a great time, great friends. And I ended up getting these marks in year 12 that surpassed what I was expecting. And coming from a medical family, I got encouraged to do medicine. And I had put no effort into thinking about life beyond school. So I said, sure, I'll go do medicine, right? As you do. And anyway, I hated it. I hated it from the minute I started it. It was highly competitive. It was all about stepping on top of each other. And I don't really like blood and guts, to be honest. I liked the preventative side of things, but the main medical stuff was just not for me. But for some reason, I persisted. There was nothing about it that was giving me the green light that I should keep going, but I did, and I reluctantly finished, and then did a couple of clinical years practicing as a doctor, which confirmed I really didn't enjoy medicine. And what I was beginning to realise at this stage is that I'd just spent the last 10 years doing things I thought I should do, not what I actually wanted to do. I'd given away my will a bit, and I was kind of answering to the expectations of other people. Anyway, at that time, I was married and we had our first child. So I was able to take a little bit of time out from medicine and think about what I'm doing. And I went back and studied, because I do like studying, and did my master's in public health, and then was in preventative medicine, working with the bowel cancer prevention program and Diabetes Australia and a few other public health campaigns. We went on to have 4 children, and when our eldest was old enough to start preschool, we enrolled her in a Montessori school, Melbourne Montessori School. And we just went there to an open day, and there was something about it that was like, this is good. But my husband and I knew nothing about it. Anyway, then our 4 children were all enrolled, and the more time we spent at the school, the more we were both learning about it, and the more interested I was becoming in the pedagogy and the ideas behind it. And we had a move interstate, which gave me another chance to have a bit of a reflection, and I decided at that point to go back and study and did a graduate diploma with the Montessori Institute for 6 to 12, and just loved it. The more I learnt, the more I was convinced that this was the right way to go. And most importantly, I think it was the idea of preventing all the things that I was treating as a doctor. If we could help little children and bigger children become the fullest version of themselves, a lot of the chronic illness that I was trying to address in my medical practice wouldn't even be relevant. But also, it was much more fun working with children, and a much nicer working environment. I finally felt like I'd found my tribe, some other kindred spirits, and yeah, that I haven't looked back since then.
Giving them a pencil instead of sticking a needle in their arm is
Yeah.
probably makes you more approachable to children. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did you teach 6 to 12?
Yes, so I was taught a cycle 3 classroom, initially in a job sharing capacity, and then had some time by myself. But I found that hard with 4 children who were all still at school at that stage. Teaching full time, it was just a bit too much for me. So I much preferred when I could do a job sharing
Yeah.
capacity, job sharing version. But that sometimes a bit, that has its own challenges.
Yeah. So what did you most love about being a Montessori educator?
Um, I loved all of it. I loved being with the children. I love that energy, that joy. I loved the collaboration. I loved the opportunity to learn from them each day. Nothing ever went as you would think it would go, but that was kind of really liberating. You could
Mm.
you could let trust the process. There's so much. I love the pedagogy. I love how we teach children. I love the great stories, and I love watching where the children take those ideas or how they connect with the story. Um, yeah, there wasn't much that I didn't love.
Mm. How have you seen Montessori affect your own children, the four of your own children?
Yes, that's a great question. So each of our children completed their primary schooling at Montessori, and I've now got 3 children who've left school. I've got one who's in year 11 this year, and I think high school was something they just had to do. They've all been okay, but I think after Montessori, it was never that as joyous as they'd been whilst they were at primary school. But I'm really watching them come into themselves again in their tertiary studies. I think they've all 3 who are there now have just blossomed, and I can just feel that that's a lot to do with how they started their schooling at Montessori. They're all doing very different things. My eldest is an artist. She's a painter. My second daughter is in politics. She's fierce. She's going to change the world.
Mm.
Number 3 has just started studying criminology and forensic science. So I'm loving watching her reveal herself a bit more as well.
So this is a bit of an old question about, Montessori, about whether it truly has an effect on all children or if it's just the kind of wealth effect. So how do you know that the effect that you saw on your children is due to Montessori versus having a mom who's a doctor?
Oh, great. Well, I don't know if it was very useful for them having a mum who was a doctor. Much more useful having a mum who was a Montessori teacher. What I think, Mark, is that that connection to self and ownership of who they are, that accountability that is fostered in Montessori, is not something that is a wealth effect. It's something that you have to do every day. It's a philosophy. It's a practice, and it's just all those incremental steps that add up to being that fullest version of you. And I think that they related to that as children, and they're stepping back into that really as young adults. And I can see, a lot of their peers are having different experiences. My 3 eldest children have all moved interstate to study. They really wanted to have that independent learning opportunity. So I think they're seeking things that they know will feed.
Can you think of any examples of things that they've said or done or choices they've made that you just thought that's the result of Montessori? Like it could not have happened unless they had been at a Montessori school, where you could draw a direct connection between something that happened in their Montessori classroom and their personality or their choice or choice they made?
It's a good question. What I think is watching them at university, they didn't go expecting everything to be perfect and be done for them. So they went and knew that bits would be hard or that parts of it wouldn't go, plan A wouldn't work. So we'd be looking at plan C, and they weren't afraid of that. That was just how it worked, where a lot of other children or a lot of their peers just expected that it was going to be amazing, and then when it wasn't, didn't know what to do, or they just expected that someone else would sort it out for them. And when they don't, they're even more lost. So I just feel like it's this resilience and this understanding that plan A is great, but it's not necessarily going to happen every day. So
Yeah. Because I guess the Montessori classroom it's often described as sort of more like a university than a public school classroom.
yeah,
Little small university for small people.
yeah.
Yeah.
They're
Did What were some of the notable challenges that you had in your life as a Montessori educator?
Um,
Was it all roses and
no, no. Um, Job sharing. There was some good parts and there were some bad parts. It's a bit like an arranged marriage. Um, you can be lucky. So some partnerships were really uh, easeful, and some were um, an imbalance of responsibility.
Mm,
So it was hard trying to have a partnership with someone who thinks very differently to you. But a great learning opportunity. Um, letting go of things that you can't control and trying to find small commonalities and working on those.
mm.
It was a big growth.
Yeah. So that I guess transformation of the teacher is what you're talking about, which is a
Yeah,
big part of becoming a Montessori educator,
yeah,
right? Being able to let go of the things that get in the way of, our building relationships with children.
yeah.
Yeah. What have you noticed about as a trainer yourself about how we can do that successfully with people who want to become, because I guess looking at yourself and letting go of the things that we carry with us from traumatic experiences in childhood, it's is it's not really something that you can mandate in training, right? You can't say, you are going to look at your 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 baggage and let it go. It has to be
Sure.
a choice.
Sure. And you come to it at the right time and all of those things. I think one of the big things I've noticed at training is that so I'm teaching both students who are getting their diploma, Montessori diploma, and also graduate diplomas. So some people have done no other teaching
Mm,
training. And when they come to the workshops, they desperately want a scope and sequence. They desperately want to know, when I do A, then I'll
mm,
do B, then I'll do C. And they desperately, and we don't have that for them the way they want it. We have it, but they want, after this lesson, I do this. And so at the beginning, they're holding on so tight. And then the difference is, when I'm working with teachers who've had much more experience or time in the classroom, that they don't need to hold on as tight. They're willing to let they've got faith in the process, or faith in so the transformation is that I see is that this sense of control to being just part of the bigger story that's Montessori, because it's not about one person. The teachers in Montessori are not the sage on the say I can't speak stage, on the stage, they're next to the students or working with the students. So we're all together. So it's letting go of that to being able to just be part of the bigger picture.
Yeah. Can you talk some more about how did you get into training with MI, and what does that look like with
Yeah.
MI?
So after I finished my studies, I was very fortunate to have a close working relationship with Diane Davis, who was the principal at Melbourne Montessori School at the end of her career, and she was the Victorian trainer, and we had a really great relationship, and I ended up becoming her understudy at the Institute and spent maybe 4 or 5 years running workshops with Diane and learning the tricks or the tools that we needed. And during that time, I was also working as a tutor for different students and helping in that way. So it was a really nice apprenticeship, a really gradual journey. And at the beginning, I was really just essentially observing Diane presenting the workshops. And as we went along, I was taking more and more of the responsibility. And then she had decided to finish. I thought we'd have a bit more time together. But anyway, I ended up becoming the Victorian trainer.
Mm. How does the model of training that MI offers differ to the traditional, the old AMI model of training?
So I haven't done AMI training, so I can't speak from experience. But what I understand is that Montessori Institute tries to provide a training model that you can apply to your real life. So you can be working and training at the same time. We offer curriculum workshops in each of the curriculum areas that are traditionally a week block. And we do that during holidays, typically over the summer break and in the middle of the year. And then you go after that presentation of the curriculum workshop to do placements and have different material making that you do independently, and then assignments that you do independently. So over a whole semester, you'll complete that curriculum area. So there's a week face-to-face and a lot of independent work that follows.
So this sounds more like the AMS, the American Montessori Society model of training in the US.
I think so. I think that there was some yes, there is a similarity. So the idea is that you can do it at your own pace. You can fit it in with your life and make
And
it.
how is it working in the Australian context?
I think it's really successful. I think that the students that I'm working with have really enjoyed that whole semester focusing on a particular curriculum area before moving on to the next one. It's like this incremental building of their skills or their toolbox. Some people will try and race through it, and that works for some people, where other people might take much longer time to do it. So you can tailor it to your needs. And there's a kind of a nice community that's built up at these workshops, and you'll see the same group generally over the 2 or 4 year cycle that you're working with them.
Yeah. It does seem that there's still a real dearth of Montessori teachers in Australia, and anybody you talk to at schools or centers say we can't get teachers, we can't find them anywhere. Why is it you think that this model that seems to work so well in the United States, that trains 10 times as many teachers as the traditional AMI model. Why is that not filling the gap in Australia?
It's a good question, Mark. Uh, we've definitely been seeing less teachers enrolling or less people, because some who are doing the graduate diploma are coming from other areas, but there's definitely been a reduction in enrolments, especially since COVID. I think it's probably a combination of issues. I think the course is quite a financial outlay. And in the primary years, 6 to 12, most often it's the individual who's paying for it as opposed to the school, which is a big burden on a teacher's salary. So you've got to be really committed. And on that note, also, I think being a teacher is pretty hard at the moment in Australia. So taking on more is another big ask. So I feel like the lack of support from schools is pretty significant. I have schools calling me every week saying, "Do you have any graduates? Do you have anyone we can employ?" So the need is real, and I think it's pretty important that we find a way to get more students enrolled into the training courses, because I think at the moment it's bad, but in the next 3 years it's going to be really bad if we don't get a bit strategic about it.
Yeah. Do you think that the growth of online training, online only training, such as NAMC, has anything to do with the reduction of students wanting to go through courses like SMTC or MI and the other more traditional trainings?
I definitely think the price point is a very attractive component of the online courses. But the problem is that there's this balance between setting graduate or student teachers or teaching students of Montessori up to be successful and for themselves as professionals, but also for the Montessori philosophy and pedagogy. If we've got really successful teachers in the classroom, we're doing good service to the whole Montessori ideology. So whilst the online training are better than nothing, I don't think they're necessarily setting up teachers to be successful, and which means that the students in the classrooms are not going to be successful either, and the whole brand is compromised. So it's a step in. I always love it when I get a student who's done the NAMC, because they're showing me that they're really interested, and then we can take them a bit further along the journey. But I think in isolation, if that was the only training available in Australia, it would be really sad. I think we need more of this kind of apprenticeship style model where you can learn and be on the job at the same time with
Can you say a bit more about that? Like what aspects of those online only training, like an AMC, are missing that MI offers? What's the piece that MI offers that's different, that encourages greater success in the classroom and preparedness of those teachers?
Well, there's so many, Mark. I think that, at NAMC, I'll have students who've completed NAMC, and then we'll be presenting different materials or lessons in the workshop, the training program, and they've never even seen that material. They don't even know, do you put it this way or this way? So there's the hands-on working with the materials that's fundamental. If you don't know how to use it, you can't successfully show someone else. And I think there's also the development of relationships. So having that a face-to-face experience means that if you do encounter something difficult later. You know who you're speaking to. You've got someone, a point of contact. And I also think the relationships that the students develop together is really important, because they can share that journey together. And the Montessori community is really small in Australia. You'll bump into people again and again. So it's relationships and collaboration. It's having a face-to-face interaction, and it's this hands-on opportunity to work and practice and hone that skill.
Mm. So people coming into Montessori from outside with no teaching, or even mainstream teachers who want to become Montessori teachers, they don't necessarily know or understand that just doing the online only training is not going to set them up for success in the classroom. So what can we do you think, to create a situation where more teachers are trained in a way that um, encourages their success in the classroom?
Yeah, another good question. Mark, I really believe that it's school leadership has a fundamental role to play here. I think that they the leadership in schools can set the tone. They can expect more than the online only version. I understand that it's this fine line where it's better than nothing, but I think if our school leaders can expect more and encourage students to go down other training pathways, it will benefit everybody. And it wouldn't take much of a shift for that to be really felt, the ripples all the way down. But whilst we're trying to do this cost-cutting budget version, we're going to get a budget version at the other end as well.
Do you think that MACD accreditation plays a role in setting minimum standards for training programs as it is in the US?
Potentially, I think I think that might be something we can aspire to down the track. But at the moment, I think it's really dire. I think we've got to be a bit more on the ground, creating a plan strategically, and then maybe we get to that ideal level of training accreditation down the track. But I just think now it's more about a lot of people stepping up and saying, we want to do this better.
Yeah. Do you have a book that you think all educators should read?
One of my favourite books that I read a lot is How to Teach Like Your Hair's on Fire. Is that?
Oh.
I wish I had it here. It's just this man who's been teaching for a long time, and his passion for teaching is so contagious. You just want to do it. It's like he's telling you that it's just like you want to play that game that he's talking about. He's got so much passion, and it's like a Papa Smurf. Just they're telling you, just go do it and it's all going to be good. And he says it with such conviction and such joy that you want to do it.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. Liz, are you Googling that?
Is that the right name? How to Teach Like Your Hair's on Fire?
Yeah, by Raf Asquith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not Montessori. It's just about passion and giving to what you're doing.
It's just called Teach Like Your Hair's on Fire.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Haley, you mentioned earlier this work-life balance and that was challenging for you as a mom of four. What advice do you have for new educators about managing that work-life balance, work-play balance even?
Yeah, I find the whole term of work-life balance really challenging, because life is the bigger thing, and it's not like we do all our living separate from work. So it's how to wear different hats successfully at the same time. That would be my tweak on the term. I would say that part of growing up and maturing and learning more about yourself is you get better at seeing when the hats are not working together. Work-life blend, great. Yeah, when the hats are not working well together. And there'll be periods in life when something will definitely need more attention than others. But I think I've been really conscious of modelling kind of a healthy relationship between all the different hats that I'm wearing. I want to show my children, my students or my own children, I want to model that being healthy physically, being healthy mentally, being a contributor, being of service, all those different things at the same time. And if one's taking too much, I'm quite conscious of trying to see how I can tweak things to make it more enjoyable.
Yeah.
What advice would I give young people? Just to look at the challenges as opportunities. So when things are feeling really bad or really overwhelming, where's the opportunity in that? What can we peel back, or what can we what has to stay and what can we let go? And finding, like, when things are overwhelming or something's too much or things are out of balance, finding mentors, finding people in your environment, work environment, or your family, or so, because people have done it all before. You don't have to reinvent the wheel yourself every time.
Yeah, it really needs to be an apprenticeship. You talked about that earlier. It's the nature of teaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there areas, do you think, where Montessori needs to be updated to better fit the modern world?
Well,
Life's changed quite a lot since Maria was alive.
I love it every time
Childhood has changed.
I'm preparing for a workshop, Mark. I'll go back over all my old philosophy notes and then all my pedagogy things. And I always get so excited to rediscover one of the ideas or because there's such wisdom, like everything is so considered. And the more I learn and the deeper I dive into it, I actually think it doesn't need to change. I think all the magic's there, and it's I think that the more you trust the pedagogy or the philosophy, the more liberating it is, and the more applicable it is. And I think that just last week we were all talking about phonics and reading. I mean, we've been doing that forever. So all this new research and ideas or gold standard, I think it's in there already. I think there was such wisdom that went into generating the Montessori ideal that I don't think things need to be changed. I think we can bring other things in easily under the same umbrella.
Do you think that the incidence of learning challenges, including ADHD or neurodivergence, do you think that has increased over time? As a medico yourself, would you say that it's increased, or do you think that the reporting has increased, the awareness of it has increased, or do you think maybe it's the increasing incidents are a result of modern life? The increased use of screens in childhood, the reduced access to natural environments, the the decrease in interaction between adults and the children, for example, because of overwork and so on?
Great question. I wish I had a quick answer for you. Is it increasing in incidence? Probably. Are we talking about it a lot more? Definitely. Why are we seeing more children and adults struggling in our modern society? I think there's a lot of elements that are coming together to give us this kind of explosion at the moment. I think especially in the education setting, we are setting such narrow outcomes for the children that it's very hard for most children to attain that. And subsequently, a lot of children are finding school really difficult. And I'm talking more mainstream than Montessori. I think whilst we have such a narrow endpoint for our education, it's going to hurt everyone trying to squeeze the children through there, the teachers, the parents, the students. So I think quite a lot of it is structural, the problem. In saying that, I definitely think there's some things that is happening on a physiological, developmental level for the children as well. But what do we do about that? And it's really about creating a much broader educational outcome where many more children can feel successful. I kind of did a bit of a wiggle around your question because it's so big.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think a lot more research needs to be done. My own child was recently diagnosed with as on the spectrum, and also ADHD, and it was a little looking back. I guess there were signs that of ASD that we didn't notice but could have, but also ADHD, and she was in Montessori until 6th grade and then has been in high school, in public high school. And that has really brought out a lot of these behaviors. And, the assessing psychologist said, well, yeah, you wouldn't have seen that in Montessori because it accommodates for all of those issues. So that's really why we didn't see that. So it's a kind of a combination, I guess, which is what you were saying. There are biological factors, but it's also the expectations that are put on children in particularly mainstream classrooms that brings out that behavior that you might not otherwise see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you
interested to see? I think we're learning more and more. It's a relatively new space, and I'm watching it with a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think there are aspects of Montessori that need to be updated to accommodate for neurodiversity and those challenges that we're seeing more and more of?
Not in Montessori, but I'm speaking with a lot of teachers who are feeling ill-equipped, like personally. So whatever the teachers need to be supported, I'm an advocate for, whether it's a better understanding of the developmental causes of neurodiversity, or is it behaviour management, or is it finding ways to I'm trying to think, to go back in the curriculum so you can find the appropriate point at which to connect that child, whatever it is, because it's very individual. I think we need to really support the teachers, but it's not changing the umbrella again. It's like, how can we help the teachers connect in to help the students connect in?
So mentoring and experience.
I think that's, yeah.
Yeah. So I know as a young teacher myself, many, many years ago, there was an expectation that I'd give a lesson and children would use the materials and there'd be this outcome. And when that didn't happen, it was very frustrating. Why aren't you learning this? You've been using the checkerboard for so many weeks. Why isn't this happening? So I think the more experience we have as teachers, the more we become flexible with the pedagogy and the curriculum and the materials and are able to use them in a way that's more individualized.
Yeah. And I also think, Mark, a lot of schools are seeing more children who haven't been successful in the mainstream environment coming to the Montessori environment. So there's this different normalization in the classroom is harder to achieve, maybe. So it's about bringing new children in with appropriate support, where they're going to be successful, because in the whole classroom can be. So it needs to be done in a considered way, not a reactive way.
Montessori's been in Australia for well over a century now, since 1913 in Blackfriars in Sydney, I think it was. Why do you think Montessori is not more readily available in this country?
I have been a passionate advocate for trying to get Montessori in more government schools. Having Montessori be more accessible is definitely a passion project of mine, and it's so hard. It's about finding the. I recently have come in from a policy point of view, and I thought that advocacy from the top down was the way to go. But what I'm discovering is that advocacy from the ground up is a better way to go. So with the growth of Montessori early learning, there's a lot more parents on the ground who are looking for Montessori. So I think this is an opportune time for Montessori primary and secondary education to take off. So we've got lots of parents who know what Montessori is. They're seeing their children be successful and normalized, and that feels good. And then the step now is to get enough of a groundswell of parents who are wanting that, and then finding the right principal who's willing to take it on board. And then once you've got that principal, the challenge is finding the teachers, because the classrooms are there, the budgets are there to buy the materials. But where our problem is in Australia at the moment, it's having people adequately trained to be able to deliver the program, which I think is probably what happened a century ago, because to get the training a century ago, you had to travel to Europe, and not many people could do that. At least now we have training available in Australia, but it's just, how do we translate that to more teachers being available to actually deliver the program? I think the demand's there. We've just got to make sure the product's available to be utilised.
Yeah, it seems to be quite a turbulent time in Australian education at the moment. We've got increasing numbers of families looking for alternatives, leaving, going to home education, looking for alternatives outside mainstream education. We've got, the movement, I guess, backwards in New South Wales public education to explicit instruction, and elsewhere. So it seems to be a lot of shaking up beginning to happen in education and rethinking. How do you think we can make sure that Montessori is part of the answer, that in that conversation that's starting to happen in Australia about where education should go?
Yeah, I think there's such a big opportunity at the moment. And again, I think it comes back to leadership. I think that we have to be a bit strategic about it. The chance that we might fall upon the right principal at a government school and there might just be this magical Montessori teacher appear and everything align is pretty slim. But I think if we are strategic about wanting to increase the Montessori footprint in Australia, I reckon we're all pretty clever and we're pretty creative and we could make it happen. But to just have all these isolated pods happening, it might work, but I don't think it'll be as successful. So, yeah, I think it's a leadership strategic ideal.
Can you say more? Leadership from where?
Well, there's lots of opportunities for leadership. Is it a state-based, in Victoria, all the principals come together and say, we've got all these independent schools here, but we'd like to make a commitment to enable for state schools to transition to Montessori. Or I think local is better because you need to have an understanding of what the need is in your area, but it could be an Australia-wide strategy as well. But I think it'd be better to work more locally. So principals or I think it's principals at the moment. I think they're the right ones to take it forward. But it's a bit of being of service to something bigger than just their school, which is a big ask because running a school's a huge job.
Yeah. I'd like to open it up to anybody else to, if you have a comment or a question for Hali, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. Hali, do you think in the meantime, while people are thinking, do you think that collaboration among Montessorians is an important part of putting Montessori more on the table in this conversation about education?
I definitely think so, Mark. Whenever I get a new group of students together in one of the workshops, I always say it feels a bit like Roald Dahl the Witches. We're all separate, doing our own thing. And it's finally when you come together, you can take your gloves off and your wig and itch your hair and show who you really are. So, and it's so that energy of being together is so productive and purposeful. I feel like as Montessorians, we can quite often get stuck in our own little islands. So coming together, especially for the bigger picture things, is fundamental.
Yeah. Philippa, you had a question or a comment?
Oh, I've just got a few comments. Hali, thank you so much. I actually had the privilege of training with you at Farmhouse. I think it was doing the maths that we did together. And I just a few comments. It's really interesting, Mark, to talk about the online training. I have to admit an AMI trained 3 to 6 teacher, and I was lucky to be able to audit 3 of the curriculum contents for MWEI. Which was amazing and fantastic because I work across the schools. My school, I'm the learning support person, so I've also got an interest in the children with diverse needs as well. But I just wanted to say that the collaboration that you have, and I see quite a few of those people still. I see Toby, I see Thomas, and I see Jenny, who actually trained the courses before, and I keep in touch with Lara. I keep in touch with all the people who did that training through MWEI as well. And I think that's something you do lose when you're doing it online. And I think it's really important, that collaboration. I mean, full disclosure, I have been around a long time in Montessori in New South Wales. So I was actually part of the SMTC, the Montessori Minds from back in the 80s and 90s. And that was an amazing collaboration as well, just to kind of see how much we've all done together as a group. I think the sense of community is something that really needs to come back to Montessori schools because, as Hali says, they tend to be individual little units. Like Victoria, New South Wales has got a very strong principals group as well. and those principals tend to get very bogged down. I personally think I'm not in the group, so I don't know, but I think with kind of compliance and things that they have to do. So I think the vision doesn't actually always come out. I think that when it was a smaller community, we had a lot more vision because we really wanted to make it work. And I think now it's accessible. So much is accessible, but it's kind of like, I mean, training teachers and I mean, I'm an ACT and I'm also done my Montessori diploma, but I'm shocked at how many Montessori diploma teachers are out there that are not ACT. So in a SEQA across Australia, we need trained teachers, early childhood teachers, to be able to meet compliance. And then, so you're pulling in all these other people who are non-Montessori to become your compliance. And it's a real shame. But, you know, I have great hope Montessori will do great things, but I think it's finding the teachers that are dissatisfied with the system that they're in right now and pulling them across and hopefully training them up. But I wanted to say thanks, Hali, and yeah, it was a great talk and great questions, Mark, too. Really, really pulled out from Hali what her training and her kind of her experience with families and stuff. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
I was just going to comment that here in the Brisbane region, just independently, some Montessorians reached out to each other and we have commenced 4 times a year, just getting together. It did include school principals, but I don't think we've had the school principals that often. And there probably is more of an early childhood focus rather than a general across the board focus, but other good things have come out of that. Like we now have added another meeting 4 times a year specifically for the educational leaders in early childhood services to come together to talk about coaching educators in Montessori and meeting the requirements of assessment and rating. So we've just had one of those so far, and that was greatly appreciated because services that had just been through A&R were sharing how it went and what seemed important. Not that the process is consistent by any means, but you know, it certainly improves confidence and gives people a little preview into, you know, what experience they might be having coming up.
Anybody else?
I'd just like to comment and agree with Hali on the groundswell and talk about how important it is. So being in the early childhood sector and seeing that is the fastest growing sector for Montessori. A lot of new people coming into the sector that haven't been necessarily come through the communities that we have existing, but wanting Montessori in their services. And I communicate with a number of services for our app and for our training college. And it's really interesting to see the different ways that people address the training and capacity shortfall that exists. But how do we turn our parent groups just from people who want, you know, good childcare into people who are demanding a school-aged pathway for their children? And that's on my mind, which is part of the thinking behind the app and part of the next project that I'm working on for the app, which is to build in nuggets of Montessori philosophy and theory into the parent part of the app, where they can see what their child has done. There might be a photo of their child, but then they can tap learn more, and trying to write that in a way that's not just theory, but it's engaging. And so things like with the pink towel, building in about purposeful movement, which is not, you know, the first thing you talk about with the pink towel, but through that we can talk about how important it is for children to move in their education until they're at least in the second plane, so that we're starting to give parents that knowledge about what to look for going forward. So yeah, it's just an app, but you know, there's a little bit of strategy behind that as well.
Mm.
Vicky, I totally agree. The parents, the demands there. I've spoken with lots of parent groups at different early learning centres. It's now translating that to having a product available in the primary setting that's ready to go. And so it's finding the right principal, and more importantly, it's having teachers who are able to do it. So I think it comes back to this strategic.
We have two programs in Queensland that are in state schools.
Yeah.
I'm not directly involved, and so what I'm about to tell you is hearsay, but I was involved with the principal, Vicky Baker, when she commenced the Groverley State School Montessori stream. And the trouble with Ed Queensland, and probably like vast education systems in other states as well, is that it's a mobile workforce. It's almost compulsory mobility in your workforce, and for people's career paths to increase, they'll take positions elsewhere in order to get the higher pay or more responsibility, whatever they're seeking. And so Montessori really relies on that consistent, well-trained workforce. And I think that it's going to be difficult to turn the Titanic away from the iceberg of mobility of those capable people, even if you get them to begin with in the state systems.
Yeah, that's well said. Thanks, Vicky. So Montessori Australia have, for those who don't know, an array of focus groups. That's how we work ground up. And one of the focus groups is the government advocacy focus group. And this group is working on a number of things, but first of all, getting the word choice into the minds of politicians about public education. And I think that the more that we can get this idea that Australian families want choice, and this is quite commonly accepted now in the United States, but not here. There's this idea that public education needs to be this monolithic, the same, everyone gets the same thing. And we've got to change that mentality. And I think we can start to chip away at it. So we're trying to meet with more and more politicians on the ground level. And so for any of you who would like to join this focus group, please let us know. We'd love to have your involvement. But also meeting with politicians and helping them understand the aspects of public education that get in the way of Montessori. So once they've accepted the idea of choice, what do we need to be able to really establish? And the importance of connection is primary. Montessori education is about connection, connection, connection. Kind of like location is the mantra for real estate, right? It's for education, it's connection. And you can't have connection if your teacher or your principal moves on, every third year. Got to have that stability. So that's one of our aims in that focus group, is to make connections with politicians of any level and help them understand the importance of choice and the importance of connection. Hali, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been so fascinating talking to you, hearing your story.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. See you in the first Monday next month.